Hi there, my name is Bruce and I'm here with Jay and with Dana, and this is Startup Disc is Full Tech Talk, where we talk about all things tech. And today we are going to be talking about energy, electricity to the home. And hopefully we're going to be able to cover a few things that might be able to save you a little bit of money now that energy prices are basically going up everywhere. So, welcome guys. Where do we start?
Well, there's a lot to cover here. We can kind of divvy it up into monitoring, like how do we even know how much power we use? Should we even be worried? You know, there's people I know that don't even check their power bill. They just automatically pay the bill every month. They have no idea what they use. Other people that are really, they make it a sport to use as little as possible. So how do you figure out how much you even use? You know, there's some nifty ways to do that. So we can look at that first if you want.
Yep, I think so. So basically, we're talking here about power monitoring, and obviously a term that gets bounced around a fair bit is a kilowatt. It's something that I had never heard of before, but it is apparently a thing over there in the States. And this is that's the device there that Jay's got. Yep. And so essentially you plug that into a PowerPoint, then you plug whatever you want into the kilowatt, and it is going to tell you how much power it is consuming. That's correct?
That is correct. It gives you there's a bunch of buttons on here that I've never used before. Basically, all I'm interested in is the button that says watts. I want to know how many watts something is pulling. But if you want to test your equipment, you can do that too, because it tells you the hertz and the volts and all that stuff. But yeah, this tells you exactly whatever is plugged into this outlet, how many watts it's using, and then you can act upon it. Like I did a few tests actually with this little device all around the house. Some things surprised me, like, oh, that's all. It only uses 10 watts. That's amazing. Other things scared the bejesus out of me. I will never use this device again because it's pulling way too much. So yeah, I can go through a few examples if you want.
Yeah, well, I'll just mention very quickly that there are plenty of other ones out there. Yeah. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here. This is one available on Amazon. I have one like this. Now, obviously, mine has the Australian plugs, not the US plugs. And this one works really well. Nice, big, clear screen. It does virtually the same thing as a kilowatt. I have another sort which I bought from local electronics retailer Jaycar, and it's one that has the screen on a cable, so you can actually, you know, have the screen, move the screen around to a more convenient place for viewing it. And one of the things you can also do, yes, they will allow you to monitor your watts. They'll allow you to monitor the voltage being drawn and the amps being drawn. But as Jay said, watts is probably the most interesting thing. But one of the things you can do with these is you can actually program in what you are currently paying for your electricity. So whatever your rate is per kilowatt hour or whatever, however it's done, and then it will not show you a wattage output. It will actually show you a dollar output. So you can actually see how much, you know, sort of how much you're spending on a particular device rather than just seeing it in watts. Now, of course, it's whatever works out as a frame of reference for you. I mean, for me, it's a bit of a pain because we have a kind of a flagful. So we have a certain amount of hours are charged at one rate, and then once you get past that, the next hours are charged at a different rate. And so programming all that in would just be a real pain. For me, I'm quite happy to just work with watts because it's something that I'm, you know, familiar with, and I can say, oh yes, that's using a lot or that's using a little. So yeah, what results did you find there, Joe?
Well, I didn't monitor as much as I wanted to because a few things in the house I'm not allowed to unplug because my wife will get upset. Excuse me. But for example, my computer setup. I run a fairly old computer, a fairly powerful computer for back in the day. And the whole setup, so that's computer, two 24-inch monitors, speakers, few external hard drives, and an LED light, has me at around 360 to 400 watts continuously. And that's not editing video or doing anything ridiculous like gaming or converting video, just basic use. That's a lot of power for a computer, especially if you take the current offerings in mind. So
And that's an always on. I mean, you don't switch that off at night?
Never. It runs by my Plex, my security camera, so this always stays on. Okay. Like I said, I was not allowed to test my wife's iMac because I'm not allowed to touch it. The TV, 52-inch, fairly modern LCD, nothing fancy. One of those speaker bars up top, and an Apple TV, 100 watts. So very, very doable. The fridge, even though it's 50 years old.
Just to put that into some sort of perspective, if we think about, okay, a lot of us are all now using fluorescent or LED globes. If you think about that back in the old incandescent globe days, in a big room, you could be happily burning a 100-watt bulb, just illuminating the room. So if you think about that, in comparison to like an old, it's often the frame of reference that I use. I always think back to an old-fashioned light globe, and whether it be a 60-watt or 100-watt or whatever. When you think about it, TV and sort of what it does, that it's 100 watts. That's obviously running fairly efficiently.
Yeah, and just thinking back 20 years when I don't know if LED lights existed, but I didn't have any. I probably used 300 watts every evening, just lighting up my room and stuff. So it's kind of crazy. My fridge, 160 watts, which kind of surprised me because it's older than I am. But the interesting thing is when the motor is running, 160 watts, when it's idling, 0 watts, not even trickle power, just nothing. But then when I open the door, 40 watts. So that tiny bulb in the fridge is 40 watts.
The bulb is still incandescent too. So.
Yeah. What's another example? My Wi-Fi router, 13 to 17 watts. I do use a time capsule, so it has a hard drive in it. That probably affects the wattage a bit, but yeah, that's one of those devices that's always on. So 13 to 17 watts is acceptable to me. And here came the shocker. A few years ago, I went from an inkjet printer to a laser printer because the cost for cartridges that kept drying up all the time and stuff. I just went laser, and I've loved it ever since. When I hooked this up to my laser printer and I fired it up, it drew almost a kilowatt of power for almost a minute, just warming up. And that made me very nervous. Very nervous.
Well, as a lot of people, as with tech talk, we talk about the tech of a laser printer. What people may not realize is the way they work is they use a dry toner, very fine powdery stuff. Good idea to stay away from it. There's some anecdotal evidence to say that if you have long-term exposure to it, it can be very, very bad to you because it'll seep into your pores and whatnot. But basically what happens is you have a roller, and then you have a laser, and then what happens is it works with positive and negative charges. And so you have the roller, which I'm going to get it around the wrong way, but let's just for argument's sake, the roller is positively charged, and then where it gets hit with the laser becomes negatively charged. And then when they roll that past the toner gets attracted to the parts that are one charge or the other. Then they charge the surface of the paper, which then makes a transfer from the roller onto the paper. And this is how they get such incredibly fine detail, because it's done with a laser. That laser basically goes through a little mirror beam splittery type thing for drawing it. Then once it's on the paper, it needs to be put there permanently, and that's done by essentially melting it or fusing it to the paper. And that's done with a heat roller. And the way those heat rollers typically work is they have a halogen globe inside them. So if you think of the old outdoor lights, it used to have those long, thin halogen globes with the sort of the element running across the middle. They basically are a hollow metal cylinder with one of those halogen globes inside it. Now, we all know how much those halogen globes use, but they basically just come on, generate a massive amount of heat really quickly, make that roller hot, and it needs to be hot enough to melt that toner. Now, as long as you are using a laser printer, that is the technology you're using. It must use heat to transfer the toner, and heat costs money. The one advantage to it is that they heat very, very fast, and then they can just be instantly switched off once the transfer is done. So, so while a laser printer is sitting idle and not doing anything, it's not likely to be using much power. But as you say, when you switch it on and it goes through all its power up and test cycles, checks to see that that heat can be generated, and when you're actually printing, yep, you're gonna tip right over into over 1,000 watts. Mine here, it's a little sort of what I call multi-function device, and that one uses well over 1,000 watts when it's printing.
Yeah, that surprised me, because I didn't know anything about laser printers when I got this. Gotta make myself look real intelligent right now, but the first time I got it, the print quality was horrible. So it's like, okay, the roller must be dirty. So I took a little microfiber, wiped it down with Windex. Don't do that. Printed again. It was worse. So like, well, something else is going on. So I take the toner out, big cartridge like this. I take some compressed air, like I'll just clean it out. Yeah,
no.
I still have some on my ceiling. That was a bad idea. But like you said, I know it's 6 watts. So not much, just the little LCD basically, but 450 to 930 watts while printing. So that was a shocker. And then there's stuff like air purifiers, dehumidifiers, 5 to 30 watts. But yeah, that's the stuff that I measured. Like I put those little LED strips underneath my kitchen cabinets. What they 3.5 watts. You know, I can. Yeah. I don't care.
So this is a really important thing with LED lights versus like an incandescent light. So an incandescent light, you know, it's usually a little strip of tungsten, and it's in a vacuum, and then basically they run power through it. That tungsten gets incredibly hot. It can't go on fire because it's in a vacuum, and it glows. Now, the downside to that is that, yes, it produces light, but it also produces an obscene amount of heat. And all of that is essentially wasted sort of infrared energy, whereas an LED produces light with far less heat, you know, but getting a lot, you know, it's mainly light and a lot less heat. And so that means that it's far more efficient. You're not getting all of this wasted infrared light from it. So yeah, I mean, obviously LED, you know, is the way to go when it comes to lighting. I'm lit with LEDs right now.
Same.
Yeah, and so all right, so we've got monitoring. So we've got either monitoring of an individual power socket, but what there's also available is whole house monitoring. Now, some electricity companies, the one that I have doesn't do this, unfortunately. I do hope they do it eventually. But a lot of the companies, they'll have that you can actually jump onto a website and look at how much power you're using at any given time of the day or night. So, you know, check with your electricity company if they have something like that, and then you could have an app or you could have a website that you can visit, and they will actually show you exactly how much you're using. You can see a particular time of the day or night, when you are using the most power, when you're using the least power, that sort of thing. If you don't have something like that, there are these sorts of things as well, and I'm just going to quickly add this. It's actually, I don't want to see a video of this. I'd like to see a picture of it. There we go. There's a picture of it. So this is a little device that you have these little clamps. Oops, sorry. And those clamps, you can clamp around one of the main wires in your breaker box. Now, that might be a little bit difficult to find. You may not get access to it. I'm not recommending you get in there and start playing around in your breaker box. You might need to get a professional to have a look at that. But essentially, you put those clips around the wire and they can monitor how much electricity is flowing through it, through the clamps. And then you have this little wireless device here, which sits in the breaker box as well. And it is essentially broadcasting how much power you're using, and it's storing it as well so that you can access it with this app, and then you can get, you know, constant information about your power consumption. And so rather than it just being checking for a particular socket or a particular device, you can get it for your whole home. So, okay, you get something like this, you're monitoring, whether you're monitoring per device or whether you're monitoring your whole house. What do we do with that information? How does that help with our power consumption?
Well, for those watching, I will put this up on screen that I forgot to do earlier, because I can show you this all day long, but this might help. So there will be links to this stuff in the description. I got mine from Amazon, I don't know if they sell directly from the website, but from what I gathered, this is the popular option here in America. There's probably other brands as well. So P3 International is the company that makes them, and you can find out all the stuff on the website. I never do the programming of the price and all that stuff, because these bounce around the whole house, and every time you unplug them, you have to put all that stuff in again. So I never do that, but I can do that. So let me stop that. What do we do with it? Well, I am slowly becoming one of the people that finds the sport to use less and less. Like I have one of those Nest thermostats, and every month it emails me out a report, and it says this month you used 100 hours less than the month before and all that, and it kind of takes it over time, and I find it a sport to do that. And same with energy. Like the Mac never goes to sleep. I use a Mac, by the way. I'm not a PC person. When I talk computers, you're only going to hear Mac out of my mouth. It never goes to sleep, but instead of leaving the screens on and waiting for them to shut off after 20 minutes or something, I just turn them off myself. Stuff like that. And these screens, they don't use a lot. They're modern, so they use 10, 15 watts each, but it still helps. At the end of the month, that's a lot of watts that I saved. And I cook electric. Now, my stove doesn't have one of these plugs on it. It has one of those big, what do you call them, 30 amp sockets on it, so I can't test it. But
yeah,
experimenting with, instead of, if I boil some water, leave the stove on for the entire time while the water boils, turn it off a little sooner every time. Because even though you turn off the power, it's still hot and it keeps boiling. Stuff like that. Just trying to conserve where I can, because I don't know what's going to happen with the price of electricity here. And my furnace to heat my home runs on gas. I don't know what's going to happen with that either. So I'm trying to be more conscious about it. And it's nice to know how much energy certain devices use, because if I'm ever in a power outage, and we'll talk about this later, and I need to switch to an alternative form of power, I need to know what I can and cannot have connected before I, blow up a generator or something. So it's fun to me.
And let's talk about phantom power, because I think that's sort of a fairly relevant thing with this when it comes to monitoring. What is
October?
What is phantom power?
Anything you leave plugged in, well, not anything. Most things that you leave connected, even when they're not on, and I've heard it called multiple things. I call it trickle power. You say phantom power. Anything with a little LED on it, like your television has a standby, it turns red or something,
or a power adapter for a laptop.
Yeah, it's not much, but that little light takes power.
Well, and when you think about it, if you go to turn your TV on with your remote, that means there has to be a remote sensor switched on at all times inside that device. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to actually detect when I press the on button on my remote.
Yeah, when my TV's off, there's a red light on. And when it's on, the red light goes off. So that's and the sensor,
I use USB hubs all over the house to charge the phones, the watches, and iPads and stuff, and they all have little blue or red lights in it. They all take power. If you take I didn't do it, but if you take all of that combined, I'm pretty sure in my house, I'm good for at least 50 to 100 watts in trickle power.
And that's all the time. And that's, again, when you look at each one individually, it's next to nothing. It's nothing you would worry about. But I mean, if you look at my television setup, okay, I've got TV set there, I've got amplifier, I've got a set-top box. That set-top box has a hard drive connected to it. I have a DVD player. I think I might even have a Wi-Fi hub there. But essentially all of these things, virtually everything that's there, is something that has a little standby light, and more importantly, it is something that you switch off and on with a remote. So every single one of those things there, is burning up some power. Very small, I get that, but as you say, add them up throughout the entire home, and it starts to be something that is, quantifiable in money at the end of the year. I'll be honest, it's not something that I worry about. I don't go around switching things off that I know are actually using that sort of trickle or phantom power. But if you are someone who is, you know, looking at that electricity bill and thinking, you know, how can I sort this out? How can I improve things? That's certainly one of the places you can look.
Yeah, my brother is one of those people that never really cared. He had money to burn. He bought whatever he wanted and left it on all day long. Then the money dried up, and he started wondering why his energy bills were that high. He was one of the first to buy a plasma television. Now, you might want to look up how much a plasma television uses. And he had, instead of putting on a CD or the radio, he had that. It's bigger than my house. That thing was on all day long playing music videos. You know, and he never thought about it. It was just a TV. What's the difference between this one and that one? And a lot of people don't know the difference between OLED and plasma. You know, TV is a TV. But it matters.
Look, this goes with a lot of things in terms of updating your products, buying new things to save money. You know, we bought a new washing machine some time ago, and once we went from a top loader to a front loader, and when we did that, we saw a noticeable difference in our electricity bill.
Really?
Yeah, and it's very easy to say to someone, oh, buy a new thing and you'll save money. Some people don't necessarily have the money to do it. But I remember we had an air conditioner installed in the room that I am in here, and we had a great big old clunky air conditioner, one of the big box ones that hangs out the back of the house. And we had one of those. It had, you know, special power point for it because it used so much electricity. And the guy who came and installed this, he just said, get rid of that. You know, it's such a false economy to be using that, because what you will be paying in your electricity bill running that all through summer, and you will be able to save so much money. You know, spend the money on the better unit, the newer unit, and your electricity bill will be so much lower that will make up for the cost of buying that new device. So, yeah,
well, that's an issue I'm running into. And I'm not good with these kind of calculations. I am not smart enough to do basic math. So
we know.
Yeah, I know you know. So a while ago, I did a lot of research on it, and I made the conclusion for myself that I will prefer to always leave my hard drives, because I use solid state drives for my startup volume. Everything else is spinners, because the cost per gigabyte is just so much better. But when it comes to putting the drive in sleep or leaving it on all the time, I came to the conclusion that it's better for the hardware and for the power consumption to always leave it spinning. Now, a lot of people disagree, but you know, those kind of calculations, like, am I better off getting a Mac Mini that is almost as powerful as the Mac Pro that I have here, but uses 1/10 of the power? Probably, but how many years of power consumption cost do I need to make up for the purchase of a $2,000 Mac Studio or something? You know, those kind of calculations I'm not any good at. If I was, there probably would be some hardware in this house that I would replace when it outweighs, you know, that stuff. But I'm not any good at it, so I just turn stuff off.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have the money, don't you? At the end of the day, I mean, it's all very well. It's all very well to say you're going to save money over a period of years, but it doesn't change the fact that you need that money up front if you want to go and buy and buy and replace something. And of course, there's that whole wastage thing as well. If you have something that still works, it's often difficult to justify turning that thing into landfill. When it still does the job. That's something that I struggle with all the time, and this is one of the reasons I try and keep things working for as long as possible. I do some computer repairs, but I don't just do computer repairs in this household. I repair anything and everything. I have repaired dishwashers, washing machines, fridges, dryers, you name it, because I like to try and keep these things going as long as possible, because the moment if you have something like a dishwasher and you have one little part that has broken, and you replace the whole thing when like 2% of the device is not working and 98% of the device is still fine. I really struggle with that. So it's a balance. It's a balance. Yes, you want to lower your power consumption, but at the same time, I hate the idea of throwing something away that still works.
Same here, but there is a limit. Like, I have family and friends currently in Europe at the time of recording this. It's October 2022. Energy prices are getting a little crazy over there, and in England as well. And I'm already now talking to people that have to choose between, I'm going to buy food or I'm going to pay this bill. Now in October, it's not even winter yet. So if that happens here, I don't know how this is going to affect the rest of the world, but I'm not going to feel as bad about tossing my Mac Pro in the basement and getting a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio. When my power bill is like $2,000 a month, I'm going to be like, okay, I love you, buddy, but bye-bye. So it's a luxury that I currently can afford to keep this machine running. But if the power bill goes up and up and up, it's going to be the first thing to get unplugged, definitely.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing about, sort of reducing the consumption. So we've obviously talked about things like the trickle or phantom power going on, updating your appliances if they're ones that are, sort of very high energy users, making sure that if you're buying new ones, that you're getting ones that are energy efficient. We have I assume this is an international thing, not just an Australian thing, I'm not sure, but all devices out here have a star rating on them for their energy efficiency. Yeah. And so obviously getting the ones with that higher efficiency is going to be saving you some money. Things like heating and cooling, and we'll talk about that in a moment, because heating and cooling are some of the biggest power hogs out there. But when it comes to cooling, or heating for that matter, if you're using a thermostat in your house, just a difference of like 1 degree can make quite a significant difference to your power bill. And our bodies get used to changes in temperature. It takes a little while. I mean, for example, yesterday it was quite a warm day, and I was really hot, but it was only like 26 degrees. Now, over here, we can get into the 40s. And so that's, sorry, Celsius, everyone. And so for, sort of for me to be feeling hot on what in the middle of summer I would consider to be a pretty mild day, is an indication that I haven't adjusted to that heat yet. So the thing is that if you're, if it's very hot outside and you're using an air conditioner to cool, you might say, I'm going to set this to 21 degrees. Well, set it to 22 or even 23. It's still going to be a lot better than it was outside. Your body will adjust to that. That's not uncomfortably hot or anything like that. And you will be saving electricity. So just having that small difference, when it comes to winter, put a jumper on, wear some warm clothes. Do the clothes first. Then if you're still uncomfortable, then start messing with the thermostat.
Yep. And a lot of people don't. I mean, my parents and especially my grandparents, this was common, Oh, you're cold? Put on a sweater. You're already wearing one? Put on a second one. What are you talking about? But now there's people that, and I did this myself until I received some wisdom on this. I had the heat running at night. Like, I don't want to be cold. That's stupid. But if you look at the research, and the colder you are when you sleep, the better you sleep. That's
Yeah, that's right.
Knowledge or science, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, all sleep professionals all say you should sleep in a cool room, and it's because your body raises temperature when you're asleep. Your temperature, your body temperature actually increases. So this idea of hopping into having a room that's all nice and warm and cozy, and so this temperature is perfect, then you hop into bed, you're likely to wake up in the middle of the night stinking hot. Yeah. So yeah, nice cool room for sleeping for sure.
And can I touch on something you mentioned earlier? Because I currently live in Ohio. I used to live in Florida. In Florida, we had this. In Ohio, unfortunately, we do not. It's what they call here time of use. Back in Florida, I used to run the dishwasher, the washing machine, and the dryer at night after 8 p.m. because energy was cheaper, not by a lot, but a little bit. Here, it's the same rate all day, every day. But yeah, I would like people to look into that, because you have it in Florida, you don't have it in Ohio, you might have it in Tennessee, or, you know, check it out on your local energy provider's website to see if you can benefit from this.
We have something here that takes that a little bit further, I think, and it's called off-peak. And it's actually a separate meter in the breaker box, and it is, so we have our main meter and then we have our off-peak meter. Now, the off-peak power only functions between certain hours of the night. So it only functions between, I don't know what it is, let's say it's 1 in the morning until, I don't know, 6 in the morning or something. I don't know. I don't know the exact hours. So if you were to run a PowerPoint from this and plug something into it, it's not going to work during the day. There's simply no power being supplied to it. But it does supply power to it during those hours during the night. Now, what do you connect to something like that? Well, we have a hot water heater connected to it. So our hot water is heated off peak. So if we run out of hot water during the day, we have to wait until overnight. And now, admittedly, it doesn't happen, because when you have off-peak power, what you generally do is you get a very big hot water heater. You get a nice big one, so it's got plenty of hot water to supply you throughout the day, and then it only heats during the night, and that is charged at a much lower rate. And then when you get your electricity bill, you get your peak usage, and then you get your off-peak usage, and they're two separate things there. But obviously, you could set that up to go even further. You could be connecting, you know, things to it that you might only need at night. As you say, I mean, you could connect up a PowerPoint to your dishwasher and make it so that you only run your dishwasher at night, or your washing machine for that matter. You could theoretically go in and create this off-peak, and it's probably important to talk about why something like off-peak power is cheaper, and that's because once you start doing this off-peak stuff, power consumption becomes a lot more predictable. I think one of the things that people don't really realize with power consumption is that it's a little bit like baking fresh bread. You know, if you bake too much fresh bread, you can't sell it because it goes off. And electricity is a little bit like that as well, because they produce a certain amount of electricity, and if they produce more than is used, a lot of it gets wasted. And so a lot of supplying electricity is based around predicting how much electricity is going to get used. So in this part of the world where it sometimes gets ridiculously hot during the summer, when they know there's a really hot day coming, they know that they're going to have to produce more power, because there are going to be way more air conditioners being switched on during the day. And if they make an inaccurate prediction about that, you then have the potential for there not being enough power, and then people ending up having blackouts. So when it comes to something like off-peak power, it's something that it's far more consistent. You know, the off-peak power is very consistent, so it's very easy for them to predict the amount of power that needs to be supplied, and supply as close to that prediction as possible, and then not have wasted power. So that sort of means that the cost of that electricity is lower. So
I like the way they do it in Australia. If I had that setup where I could hook it up to that meter, I would have a wall full of those whole house batteries, just charging at night, and in the morning flip a switch and run the whole house from those batteries.
I don't know if the savings is good enough to actually do something like that. It's theoretically possible, but it's not something that I've actually done. So, but yes, I mean, look, yes, you could potentially do something like that, power it up. But of course, that then leads us on to the next thing, and that is, you know, where we actually get our power from. And at the moment, you know, okay, so we're getting it through. I was
just about to ask that.
Yeah. And so, you know, over here, there are a series of sources. Over here, it's still mainly coal-fired power. There are, you know, we have wind turbines, we have solar as well, but the majority of the power here is still supplied via burning coal. But, you know, of course, what a lot of people are doing now, and in certain parts of the world, it is compulsory to put solar panels on all new build homes. So I think in the UK, if a new house is built, it must have a certain amount of power, its own power generation built. And that's something that I believe is going to be adopted here soon too. And so solar is obviously a pretty easy way of going when it comes to, you know, sort of being a bit more self-sufficient. And not just being totally reliant on the power coming from the grid. So what's the solar situation like in that part of the world?
It's pretty much startup companies all over the place promising you, you know, hey, we can put solar panels on your house, and your investment gets paid off basically over 10 years. So I don't know. It's kind of a crapshoot. Plus, you can't have trees around your house. You can't have a lot of shade. I don't.
God. Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
He's like, oh, you're talking. It's time for food. Yeah, it's kind of the Wild West right now. Still, there's no. Government's not, you know, making any moves to require solar panels or anything like that, nor do I think they should. But that's something that can be taken care of at a state or local level.
I have a general attitude to certain forms of electricity production, and that is, if it's there, let's take it. You know what I mean? The sun is there. Now, if you're in an area where you're not getting enough sunlight, or you're not, you know, to make it practical, then okay, I get it. It's not an option for you. And it's the same with wind. The wind is going to blow whether you put a turbine there or not. The sun is going to shine whether you put a solar panel there or not. Every area where the sun falls is some energy. And I sort of feel like if you are in a position, and this does depend on where you are, and it depends on your financial status as well, because it's one of those things that you say you're going to save money from this, but you still need the money up front. They have sort of subsidies here for solar panels. So if you buy a certain amount of solar power, it's based on how much you actually invest. So how many panels you put on the roof, how big your system is. You can get some money back from the government. So they'll say, you put in the solar panels, you spend X amount of dollars, you then send the receipt to them or whatever, and then they will send you back a rebate. You'll get a certain amount back. And I think it equates to around about 30% of the purchase price of what you bought. But you still need the money. You're still going to need some thousands of dollars to start off with to get those panels up there. And of course, you're not always going to be in a position to put those panels in the best location. You know, the house that I have, you should generally always have them facing. So obviously the sun moves in an arc, and during winter that arc comes down at an angle, and during summer it's right on top. And so you should have the solar panels facing that arc that the sun does, so that any time of the year you're still going to be maximizing the amount of sun you have if you are using stationary panels as opposed to ones that might have some tracking on them. And of course, we're also talking about people who are homeowners. If you are a renter, you can't just go in and start sticking solar panels on the roof of a rental property. So, but you know, if you do have that, as I say, it's something that I just like the idea of putting those panels up there and using this power that is there. It's always there while the sun is shining. And so I'm a strong supporter of doing that, because, you know, well, why not? I don't really see any reason why we shouldn't be capturing that energy. Yeah. But you know, things like, you know, the suburb that I live in, probably every second house has got solar panels on the roof. People have taken advantage of the what they refer to here as the solar rebates. And so the out-of-pocket cost is less. And most of those people are working on a feedback into the grid arrangement. And so, again, just talking about the two different ways you can work with if you're working with solar panels, or wind turbine. You can buy backyard wind turbines for places if you're in a particularly windy area, and apparently they do generate quite a lot of electricity. But the two ways that you can work are essentially where you use the grid like a battery. You have a monitor that monitors the amount of power that you're getting from your solar panels. You use that power. If you are creating surplus energy, more than you're using, that surplus gets fed back into the grid, and then that gets monitored. You have put X amount of power into the grid. Then at night time, when your solar panels aren't producing power and you're pulling power from the grid, it's monitoring how much you're taking from the grid. So you have two monitors. You have the giving to the grid and the taking to the grid. And they just basically get those two numbers, they subtract one from the other, and then that's what you end up paying. And it's, as I say, what that does is it uses the grid as a battery. And that's, I think it's a good arrangement.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, the alternative is batteries, and that's a whole nother discussion. When it comes to storing power to then make you, properly self-sufficient, having enough solar panels running that you produce a surplus during the day while it's sunny. That surplus gets captured in a battery, and then at night time you get to use that. But batteries are big, bulky, expensive. They have a limited lifespan. For some people, it's their only option, people who are living off the grid. Probably the two main battery technologies you'd be using for something like this would either be like a lithium ion or a lead acid. What do they call them? Deep cycle battery, I think that's what they call them. The deep cycle have a cost benefit. They are cheaper than a lithium ion battery, but a lithium ion battery has lots of other benefits. Lithium ion batteries can't be overcharged. That's very bad for them. A deep cell lead acid battery, you can overcharge them, but essentially if they overcharge, it just produces excess hydrogen gas. It's not, it's not actually, it doesn't damage the battery itself. And of course, lithium ion batteries can be incredibly dangerous. They are made very safely these days, but if a battery like that gets damaged, they can be very frightening.
Well, especially the kind of size and weight you're talking about for a house setup.
Or a car.
This is not your iPhone. If you damage one of those, you better run.
Yes.
There's one thing that I saw about 2 years ago now. Is this guy in Australia? He lives in the woods somewhere. No, I'm not talking about you.
Yeah, I don't live in the
And
woods.
he has a lot of mountains and stuff, and flowing rivers all year long. So he goes to the dump.
Yeah.
He buys a washing machine, turns that thing inside out, hooks up, puts it in the water, and it just starts generating electricity. It's the coolest thing I ever saw. And there's been many videos like that since where he goes more in depth. But yeah, if you have running water behind your house, there's no one stopping you from tapping into it. Hydroelectric is real.
Created his own hydroelectric plant there in his backyard.
This is awesome. It gets destroyed every 2 weeks with the floods and the mudslides and stuff, but he just goes out there and fixes it. It's really awesome.
As I say, I just love the idea. I love the ingenuity in that, the idea that this is here. It's here. It's happening whether I'm tapping into it or not, and I really like that. Now, one thing I just wanted to do, because we've gone on a tangent here, and I just wanted to go back and mention something really quickly. So we essentially were talking about lowering power consumption, and there is actually one particular gadget which I had never even heard of until you mentioned it, Jay, but I just think we need to feature it, and this is one of these smart power devices. So I'm going to put this up on here because, as I say, this is something that I hadn't actually seen before, but I just think it's something that really deserves a mention, because we talk about this idea of, in particular, Jay, you were mentioning your computer setup, and my computer setup here is much the same. I've got a little monitor here, and I'm currently using 770 watts. Damn, that's a lot.
What are you doing?
I'm not sure. It might be, these lights might be plugged into the same PowerPoint, but they're not usually on. But anyhow, the point of the matter is that I've got a computer here, much the same as you, a big power hog computer, and I've got that with, you know, sort of hard drives in it and whatnot, and I've got three displays, two 27-inch and one 24-inch display here. I've got a box here, like an external hard drive box with 5 spinner hard drives in it. I have got USB devices. I've got speakers, and all of these things are basically drawing power. What this device allows you to do is, if you have a look at this, you can see that there are, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 green power points, 3 red, 1 blue. Now, the blue is the master. And what you do with that is you connect up your computer. So you plug your computer in so that it is taking power from the blue. The green ones, you put in all of your peripheral stuff, your powered USB hubs, your speakers, your external hard drives, whatever. The red ones are referred to as an always on. So for those, you can plug in stuff that will not be affected by what we're about to talk about here. But what happens is when you switch off the master device, let's say it's your computer, you shut that down, this power supply, or this power brick, power board, whatever you want to call it, it detects that the master device is no longer drawing power, and it then switches off all of the green ones, stops supplying them power. So what that effectively does is it means that once the computer's off, everything that's linked to it goes off as well and isn't drawing power, trickling that phantom power away in the background. If I shut my computer down, my external hard drive case is still on. My USB hubs are still on. My speakers are still on. Even a desk lamp, you know, and you can just have all of those connected. And this is a really, really good thing. I keep my computer on all the time, so probably of no use to me. But if you are someone that shuts your computer down at the end of the day, this is a really nifty device to have to just make sure that all of those little extra things get switched off when you turn off the main computer. So I meant to mention that earlier and I forgot to do it, but this is a really good sort of power saving option under those circumstances. Yeah. And I thank Jake because I'd never even heard of him.
Well, you're welcome. I use them all over the house. The problem is I leave all my stuff on all the time as well. For me, starting up and shutting down is a 10-minute job. You know, external drives, hubs, speakers, screens, lights. Yeah, so I just leave it on.
Yeah,
but
I understand.
Yeah, we're kind of all over the place. But these things, for example, you take a kilowatt or one of those things Bruce has, and you find out how much your speakers are taking in power when they're off, plugged in but off. You aim to find out how much trickle power or phantom power all your stuff is using. Then you do the cost analysis, like I pay this amount of money per kilowatt hour. You do the math, and then you say, hey, if I buy this $35 power strip, or there's millions of them out there, how long to earn that $35 back? You might be there in a week for all you know, or it might take you a year. But for that barely any amount of money, I think it's totally worth it. And on top of that, you have surge protector built in. So it's good protection as well.
So talking about surge protectors, do they actually work?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they are what they say. They protect against surges. Not a lightning strike. Nothing protects you against a lightning strike, and I think that's kind of the misconception that a lot of people get.
21 gigawatts.
Yeah, it's like if there's a lightning strike, my computer's safe because I got this little box on the floor plugged into it. Nay.
Is a really important thing to keep in mind is if you have a look at, say, a power supply of anything, and you see all of those little pins sticking through with, you know, sort of soldered pins. And what is separating them? Well, they're being separated by air. So we are using air as an insulator between those. If air was a conductor, all of these things would be shorted out because the electricity would be traveling through it. Now, take a lightning strike that is shooting electricity through air from the clouds down to the ground, or from one cloud layer to another cloud layer. And that is where air is being a completely ineffective insulator, and that electricity is traveling across that distance. So you have something like that hits your house, hits your power lines, nothing can stop it.
Yep.
So it's very important to keep in mind that when people are talking about surge protection, they are not referring to your house being struck by lightning.
No. And even the old, I still do it. When there's a lightning storm or I hear lightning, I check the radar and there's this cloud of doom coming straight for me. I unplug important stuff. But there have been many of instances where people unplug something and then just leave it hanging there in front of the outlet.
Yeah.
If you get visited by lightning, that 1 inch or 2 inch gap, it'll bridge it, no
Should
problem.
Be, what, at least 6 inches, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if electricity can send a DeLorean back in time, anything is possible. So.
The gloves are off, man. But yeah, surge protectors, they work, but we're talking about small peaks and dips in the power grid that most of us would probably never notice, but your fine electronics, they definitely will. The thing is, you don't know if they're happening or when they're happening with a traditional surge protector, like one of those power strips with a thing in it. It doesn't tell you when it's happening. Now, if you use a battery backup that has surge protection built in, depending on the sensitivity you set, mine goes off 4 or 5 times a day when it senses an irregular peak or dip. It's like beep. It switches to battery. I get a message on my screen, and I hear the beep 600 times because I have batteries everywhere. But yeah, they definitely work, and they're cheap. Every power strip you buy basically has one built in, whether it's rated for really big surges or really small ones. It can't hurt to have,
Oh, yeah.
So if we're looking at a situation where you've got power which is giving you problems, whether it be you're getting surges or you're getting dips or you might be getting a complete blackout, you might be losing power completely. Now, I'll just say in this part of the world where I am, blackouts are a pretty uncommon thing. You might get them during an electrical storm if some lines get hit, or you might get them if there's some routine maintenance going on or some scheduled maintenance going on. But I very rarely end up with the power going out here unexpectedly. Having said that, as someone who is self-employed, and really, if I'm on a deadline, I can't just ring up the client and say, sorry, I can't do this because I've lost power. It's not their problem, it's mine. So I have a generator. It's only a small generator. It generates around about, I think it's around about 2,000 watts, maybe a little bit more. 4-stroke engine, not particularly noisy, starts very, very easily. It's designed, it has an economy mode on it. So rather than it being on all the time, it will actually increase or decrease depending on how much power you're drawing from it. And this is a very, very handy thing to have. It doesn't automatically kick in if the power goes out. So if the power goes out, everything's going to switch off. But I can then go and fire it up and then switch everything back on again and use it for as long as I need until the power comes back on, and then switch it back again. Now, it's a very, very convenient thing to have. It's not necessarily what everyone would have. If we had a long-term power blackout, it's something I could connect my fridges to so that I didn't have food going off. But it is a very, very handy thing to have. That one cost me, I bought a cheap one a while ago, and it died quite quickly. So I spent a little bit more on this one. And,
yeah, what you pay for, huh?
Excellent. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was under 1,000, but it was more than a few hundred. So that's my recollection of it. So I think it was getting close to $1,000. But of course, it uses petrol, and petrol, gasoline is expensive as well. So this isn't something where you would just switch off the grid and start using the generator instead. It is not a particularly efficient, inexpensive way of powering your home.
It's for emergencies.
It is an emergency system, yeah.
For that situation off grid, I would still, excuse me, go to solar as my first go-to. But same, right now I work from home as well, employed by a company. I used to have my own business going on here, but if I lost power, no big deal. I'll solder and do repairs tomorrow or day after that. My wife has clients and pretty strict deadlines. So I bought this 1 or 2 years ago. This generator can easily handle the fridges, like basic cooling, and my wife's entire computer setup. The computer, the screens, the hard drives, keep the internet going, everything. So I bought this specifically to keep her business going at all times. Now I work from home as well, so I'm glad that I have it. But yeah, definitely, especially the grid being the way it is. I had no I think in the first 25, 26 years of my life, I experienced one power outage. And then I moved to a country where all the power cables are hanging in wooden poles from 500 years ago alongside the street. And now I have them all the time. First in Florida with hurricanes and pigeons and squirrels eating the lines. And now here in Ohio with blizzards and ice storms and just general poor maintenance. I'm definitely glad to have a generator. Definitely. You don't have to go with a Westinghouse. The Honda is really good as well. And I know I'm kind of skipping ahead to a different thing we were going to talk about. But
yeah, I mean, no, it is relevant. I mean, you that one is okay. So that's 4,500 watts. I mean, that's a lot of power. So you could run a lot of things off that.
3,700, but for when the fridge kicks in and stuff, it has 4,500 peak.
And this one has a starter motor in it as well, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, it even comes with a remote, if you can believe that.
Oh, so you can start it from like inside the house or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
I think that's a feature they built in for people that are sleeping in a camper, so they don't have to go outside. They could just start it from the window. But yeah, it's nifty. Most importantly, it is an inverter generator. Now, I could talk about this for the next 6 hours, probably, but I'll keep it brief.
Now, while my generator is not a, I don't think it is actually a Westinghouse. It looks like this. So as you can see, it's a much smaller unit. That's in Australian dollars, which is why you see this one being more expensive than that flash one that Tay was just looking at. But mine's basically like this, and as I say, it's pretty quiet. You know, it gives me enough power to run my office. All of the computers, routers, Wi-Fi, all those things all run quite happily on that without maxing it out. And yeah, it's just a nice little convenient thing. But as you can see, it does have a little cord that you need to use to start it. And that's basically, and it even has a little USB port in it.
Man, that's fancy.
Yeah, so, not particularly, but anyhow. So anyhow,
I should point out, because you mentioned petrol or gas or fuel or whatever you want to call it. I didn't have the money at the time because I saved up for this one for a bit. I wanted to get the dual fuel model. You either hook up a propane bottle or you put fuel in the tank. That's what I really wanted, but yeah, I didn't have the cash for that at the time, and it's better to have something than nothing. But you have the dual fuel models that are pretty popular too. I think each brand has them.
So, okay, I cut you off there. You were basically talking about inverter generators, this whole sine wavy type stuff, and you've got 30 seconds start now.
Yeah. So you have the generators that are pretty cheap. You see them at construction websites. I mean, they're not cheap, but they're a lot cheaper than these enclosed generators that I just had on the screen. The thing is, you can get those, and I call them construction site generators. You've all seen them. I should probably pull up a picture. Actually, you can overlay one while you're editing.
Yeah, I can do that. I think I might even have one here.
Power of editing. But you do not want to hook up your TV or your computers or routers or modems or any kind of sensitive electronics with a microprocessor in it. You want to hook up to an inverter generator. That is because the power, like one of those. If you hook up your computer to that, you probably destroy it. Not in the first 5 minutes, but
these are for drills, power tools, you know, that sort of stuff. Motors that don't really mind a little bit of a fluctuation in here.
Yeah.
But as you say, these are not for laptops, and they're open with that. They will tell you, if you look at the specs of this, they will say not suitable for computers and laptops and stuff like that. So
right. Well, and you pulled up a ridiculous example here. 8 kilovolts. That's ridiculous. That's
to power an entire. It's obviously designed to power an entire site. So
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, these kind of generators are typically, for the same amount of output, a lot cheaper than the inverter generators. The thing is, the voltage that a generator spits out is dictated by the RPM of the engine. And there's no way you can hold a small engine like this at a steady RPM all the time. It fluctuates.
Yeah.
What an inverter generator does is it's basically like a big surge protector. It catches the voltage that comes out of the engine or the generator head, whatever you call it. It takes it, it converts it, and then it gives you a steady signal that your electronics like. The generator you just had up on screen doesn't. It just spits out what it spits out, and your jack or whatever power tool you're using doesn't care, but your computer, your TV, and all that stuff does. That's why the inverter generators are typically a bit more expensive. But if you want to power this kind of electronic gear, you definitely want to go with an inverter generator.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So. And I guess, look, the other thing we have when it comes to, I guess, when we're talking about some sort of backup system, if there are problems with the power coming into your house, is the idea of a UPS, or uninterruptible power supply, for things like computers that might protect you against a relatively short power outage, or more importantly, if it turns into a long power outage, give you an opportunity to then shut things down and save them. So
I can show you what I use.
Yes, please do.
Do it. Oh,
I have
nice.
2 of these. This provides, so right now I also have a Mac Pro, and then 2 23-inch displays and a 30-inch display. And so when the power goes out, I have about 17 minutes of backup battery for this setup. Of course, if I have anything else on, it's going to add power, but by and large, 15 to 17 minutes this will give me, and that's enough time to save whatever I'm doing, shut down, unplug, whatever.
Yep. And these will typically also condition the power as well, won't they? So they will, if you are getting spikes or dips or something like that, these will smooth that out and make sure that the power that you're getting is consistent. This
does have let's see, 6 battery backup and surge protected outlets, 6 surge protected outlets.
Will this shut your computer down automatically if you're not there?
I believe the software will, but the software is, they have a Mac version. They also have a Windows version, of course. Power Panel Personal. It's a little bit buggy, and so I've never actually tried it, because anytime I'm here and the power goes off, I hear it beeping, so I come in and shut everything down. But I'm not sure if it will. Actually, let me open the Power Panel right quick.
If you have software from CyberPower, it's already way ahead of the brand that I favor is APC.
Yeah, that's what it is.
When Mac OS X started putting these kind of features into the OS, like if you hook up a battery backup with the USB cable, Mac OS will detect it. And if you go to Energy Saver, you can put settings like shut down if the battery is under 20% or after 5 minutes. And APC said, oh, it's built into the Mac OS, so you get nothing. They have the software for Windows, not for the Mac. So that's really a ripoff.
I'm looking through the software here, and it does have safeties for if the voltage gets too low or it gets too high. What you can tell the unit to take over. You can have it do a shutdown if the voltage gets too low. It will send notifications to your email. So yeah, it's a pretty full-featured software. I've just never actually gone through it to use it. So, but it can be a little bit buggy. Like it's one of these things where if if you when you start up, obviously the control panel comes up, you close it, and then you go to your system preferences where you do something else, and then as soon as you close that window, the CyberPower pops back up. So it's a little bit buggy, but thankfully not as far as functionality goes.
I might have to explore CyberPower then, because not having that software really bugs me.
I really like it. Like it's a very clear display, as Tim Cook would say. Yes. Let's see. Let me find a picture of the back here. Yeah, there we go. So you've got your coax in and out. You've got network cables, serial USB, and then these are the white ones are your surge with battery backup, and the other ones are just surge protection. So that's like peripherals and things like that. But
so these are typically what these are is a bunch of sealed lead acid batteries, small sealed lead acid batteries inside. Now the downside to these is, of course, that sealed lead acid batteries have a limited lifespan. So at a certain time, they have to be opened up and all those batteries replaced, which comes at a pretty high cost. Yeah. And it's also the reason why a lot of these UPSs can be bought quite cheap secondhand, because you'll find that what they're selling you is an empty box, or they're selling you a box full of dead SLA batteries. And so you will then have to replace all those batteries, and that's a fairly significant cost. So just be mindful of that, that if you are looking to pick up one of these on the secondhand market, you do have to cost the batteries. However many it might have. That one I saw, it was 6 batteries. So you'll have to find out what sort of batteries they use and what the cost of replacing the whole lot of them is, and whether you're going to be better off actually going down that path as opposed to just buying yourself a brand new one with new batteries. And of course, the other thing with these things is they are obscenely heavy, because the L part of an SLA is lead. And they're full of liquid, and they're very, very heavy. So but yeah, definitely I don't have one. I used to have one at my last job. Since I've been working here at home, I have not had a UPS. I've thought about buying one, and then I buy something better instead, like a microphone or a camera or something. It clearly has not been a big enough priority for me. But
the money you invested in your chicken camera setup alone would provide your whole house with batteries.
Links in the description.
I'm having a lot of trouble with the chicken setups at the moment. So,
but to be honest, I refuse to buy a battery backup or a uninterruptible power supply new. I always go to the local recycler that has typically bins full of them. They might be older, they might not have a little LCD in it, but they always work. You buy new batteries on Amazon. For example, the battery backup I use, it has batteries that are 12 volts, 6 amp hour. So you go on Amazon and you buy 12 volts, 8 amp hour. You get stronger batteries, or batteries that don't harm the battery backup. They're the same capacity, but you get a lot more output and longer battery life. And they're either free or super cheap. All you need is new batteries.
Yeah.
So, and like Bruce said, if you get one from eBay or brand new, you have to factor in shipping, which can cost a bit. So.
Yeah.
Obviously, the size and the connector are an important thing to keep in mind. Some of those UPSs have their own little proprietary connector for connecting it up to, connecting the battery up to the main device, and obviously the other thing is the physical size. Yes, you can get ones that might have a higher amp hour rating on them, but just make sure that they are the same dimensions. Dimensions are the really important part of getting replacement battery in those things.
Yeah, don't just go hooking up a car battery. It's going to end bad.
Might work, you know.
You're going to get a lot of power.
So we've got surge protectors we've talked about. We've got battery backups. One of the things that I've got here in the list here is also power interference. Now, this is not something that I really have much of an experience with, so over to you, Jay.
Well, I can I cannot demonstrate this because I put this screen behind me to mask the mountains of garbage behind it. But if I turn on my printer, mind you, this is a printer that pulls a kilowatt when I turn it on, my battery backups in the office go beep. They freak out because obviously it sends a jolt through the circuit that upsets all my battery backups and thus all the electronics that I normally would have connected to the regular outlets. So you can create your own power surges without even knowing that. You don't have to blame the grid for that, although usually I do. It might be your fault. A laser printer, a microwave, what else? A water heater, if it's old, can really send a surge through the house as well. So having these kind of surge protectors in place, even if your grid is next level, never fails, it could be quite beneficial. And we covered the per device or per cluster of devices. You can also have whole house surge protectors that I'm not familiar with because I currently rent, but you can just have those hooked up before your breaker box and they will address this stuff for you. But there will still be surges from inside the house if you have a laser printer, for example.
Yep. Okay. So we're actually getting pretty close to the end of the list here. I guess one of the things that we might want to talk about here are, we touched on this a little bit before, but talking about serious serious power hogs. So, you know, we talked about how much our computer's using here. We've talked about lights, LED lights using that. But there are some things that really gobble up electricity. So again, if you're someone who is conscious about the amount of power that you're consuming, you might want to have a think about these sorts of things, because some of them really use a lot of power. Yeah. So you got air conditioners are one very good example. You know, you have inverter air conditioners. You have ones that are more power efficient than others, but at the end of the day, the process of conditioning air uses quite a lot of power. And that was when we were talking before about maybe setting your thermostat sort of a little bit more sparingly when it comes to sort of cooling a house. So air conditioners are definitely a good power hog. Another one is small space heaters, little blower heaters, those sorts of things. They are terrible.
They typically start at 1200 watts minimum, the ones I've seen.
So over here, keep in mind we're on 240 volt power here. Over here, if you were to be buying one in this day and age, you'd probably be, if you've got the heater up on the maximum, you'd probably be using anywhere between 2,000 and 2,400 watts. If you have them down on the minimum, you might be like 1,200 watts, 1,000, 1,200 watts, something like that. Very important thing about these heaters is they're very inexpensive to buy. You can just go into the shop and you can pick one up, and you can pick one up at the grocery store here. I'm sure you can over there as well. You can just walk away with a little blower heater and you probably spend $10, $15, maybe $20 on a heater like that. So one of the problems with these, and particularly if you've got people from a low socioeconomic background and they are in a house that is cold and they don't necessarily have the money to go out and buy an expensive heater or, you know, sort of an expensive heating system. They're in a cold house, they plug a heater like that in. Now, the important thing about those heaters is they are designed for heating a very small space. And if you get a heater like that to heat a large space, they are on all the time, maximum power consumption, and they cost a fortune to run. So they are, you know, I have a blower heater in the bathroom that in winter, when I go into the bathroom, switch the heater on, very small space, gets it warm quite quickly, finish in the bathroom, switch it off again. When it comes to heating the house, again, in this part of the world where it doesn't get silly cold, we use reverse cycle air conditioning, which is actually quite an energy efficient way of heating. The downside to it is that it doesn't work in really cold temperatures. If it's very, very cold outside, if it's like below 0 degrees Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, if it's below that, they don't work terribly well. Essentially, the outside part of them just freezes up and then they stop. They stop providing heat. In this part of the world where it really doesn't get that cold, they're quite an energy efficient way of heating the house. That's a reverse cycle air conditioner. But yeah, the small space blower heaters that are, churning out huge amounts of power, and again, might be heating an area that is way too big for that heater, designed for that heater, that they will just cost you an absolute fortune to run. So they're a no-no.
Can I tell you about a friend of mine?
Please.
That used to live in Rochester, New York. So we're talking close to the lakes, almost border Canada. 30 below, whether you talk Fahrenheit or Celsius, it gets really cold there.
Yeah.
His house, 2-story house, 3-story house, all wood construction. Insulation wasn't a thing when they built it. His furnace was older than I am, at least. It had some issues, so he didn't really run it. He says, no, I just use electric heaters in whatever room I'm in. He had 2 of those little space heaters in every room, full crank. And I'm like, dude, you need to have your furnace fixed. Said, nah, it's too expensive. Said, I went to his house. I brought a bunch of these, and we did a test for 1 day. At any given hour, because he didn't just leave the bedroom to go to the office and then back, because he didn't want to get back to a cold bedroom, or they were on all the time. All the time. Even in the basement, he had one on. For what? The litter boxes? For the cats? Come on. He used, at any given time, throughout the entire house, just the space heaters, 8,000 watts. Oh. How his breaker box handled it, I have no idea. How the wires didn't melt. 8,000 watts.
Oh, my God.
At least 20 hours a day, because he would fall asleep and forget to turn them off. He's like, oh, it's nice and warm when I wake up. Convert that to dollars. And this was before the current energy stuff going on. He would have paid for a new furnace and whatever it cost to have natural gas fed through the house in a few months.
Yeah.
And he did this for 9 years.
Oh my God.
So just to put that in perspective, it boggles the mind.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess that touches on another thing, and that is, reducing the need altogether with things like insulation and stuff like that. Here in Australia, again, there's often been an attitude that this place doesn't actually get cold. So a lot of the homes here are built with very, very poor insulation. There's no insulation in the walls, no insulation under the floor. It's very common for there to be insulation in the ceiling here. You'll find probably 99% of homes have got insulation in the ceiling. But a lot of homes, and in particular the house that I live in now, it was built in the 1960s, no insulation in the walls, no insulation under the floor. And no sort of double glazed windows or anything like that. So it's a very, very inefficient house when it comes to heating and cooling, and that can make a big difference as well. Again, there's outlay involved. It costs money to get your house properly insulated. There are ones where they can sort of spray foam into the wall cavities and stuff like that. There is a definite cost involved, but can end up saving you an awful lot of money in the long run. And of course, out here with new construction, it's a lot better. They're actually providing some better insulation in new homes that are getting built. But yeah, that does make a very, very big difference to your heating and cooling costs if your house is going to be properly insulated.
Yeah, my house isn't. This house that I'm in, I can feel the heat or the cold radiating from the wall, depending on what's going on outside. And I just went through the house. I have a thermal camera that I use for the repairs I do, and I just went through the whole house a few years ago. I think 2 years ago I got it. And just started improving on the little drafts and the little gaps, and you have that expanding foam. I just started applying that everywhere. You let it sit for a day, it looks grotesque, and then you go there with a knife, you cut it and then you paint it over. It's very cheap, easy way to put some insulation in your house. Of course, it's not going to help you if your wall is just bare wood and behind it is the elements, but in my basement I put that plastic that you wrap stuff with, the stretchy plastic. I put it up against the ceiling of the basement because it was just straight wood of the floor that I'm sitting on right now. Just created a little air barrier. Cost me $5 for it. Made a huge difference. So there are little tweaks, or I don't want to call them hacks per se, but there's things you can do to make your house a lot more energy efficient too.
You can buy polystyrene foam bricks that have been sort of pre-cut to size within reason. The standard different distance between you know, sort of the joists under the house. Yeah. So these are ones for actually designed for under the floor, and they're designed with a level of kind of, the way they're cut, they're designed with a certain level of expandability, so that you can essentially push them up and just shove them in there. You don't need anything else to fix them in place. They're just held in by compression, sort of thing, and they're designed to be the space between the timber. So you just buy them and then you just put them up there, and it's literally it's a you know, if you're doing like a single room or something like that, you're talking about it being like about a half an hour installation, if that. Very, very easy to do. So
I would have gone that route, but you know, I rent. I don't want to pour a bunch of money into a house that ain't mine. So I went the MacGyver route.
Yeah. And clothes dryers. That's another one that's a big old power hog. Now,
basically anything that generates heat or does something to the air.
Yeah. I mean, look at things like kettles. Okay, kettles are only on for a short amount of time, but while they are on heating that water, they're using a lot of power because they're using, you know, sort of they're radiating heat to use that power. Obviously,
that's one investment I made last year or a year and a half ago. I used to just turn on the stove, put an actual kettle on there, weep, starts whistling at me, I'm ready. Now I got one of those little electric heaters. It heats it super quick, very efficient, and it switches itself off once it boils. I think that alone has saved me a lot of money.
Made those.
So we just have a kettle. You know, basically just it's kind of a cordless thing. So the power thing is on the bottom, and then you put the kettle onto it, and then you switch it on, and it boils the water. Kettles are actually designed specifically to boil water. When you buy an electric kettle, they are designed specifically to boil that water as quickly and efficiently as possible. So yes, they use a lot of power while they're heating, but they will boil water way faster than just putting a kettle onto the hot plate. And so they're you know, if you're like me and you're a tea drinker, so you're boiling water all the time, they are definitely the way to go for that. When it comes to things like the clothes dryer, as I mentioned, now I appreciate some people in some parts of the world, maybe if they have a very, very cold winter, hanging clothes out to dry isn't really an option. But over here, I mean, you can still dry clothes on a clothesline here all year round, unless it's raining, of course. That's just stupid. And so, you know, okay, it takes a little bit more effort to go hang out the washing and to go bring it in again. But again, it's my general feeling is that's there. The power is there. The sun is there shining down. Use it, you know, rather than using extra power to dry your clothes. Dryers are a fantastic thing when you've got inclement weather. They're a fantastic thing for convenience. Like, oh my goodness, I was going to wear these clothes out tonight and they're not clean. You're going to chuck them in the washing machine, chuck them in the dryer, and away you go. They're great for that. But 90% of the clothes that get washed in this household get hung out on a line and dried by the sun because it's there.
I've been guilty of using the dryer for everything until about a year ago. I think I mentioned it to you guys in chat at the time. I was gonna my path to become more energy conscious has been going on for about 2 years now. I pick my battles, obviously 12 Core Mac Pro. I pretend it's not there, but I did put up 3 clotheslines in my basement, and now if I don't need it today or next day, I hang it and it'll be dry, and then I toss it in the dryer for 5 minutes just to get the stiffness out, which doesn't really matter anymore because I use a fabric softener now that takes care of that. But yeah, or certain blankets that the cats love to sleep on, I toss it in the dryer and I do the air fluff, not even the heat, just the air fluff to get all that hair out. I barely use the dryer anymore, and it has one of those big plugs, so I can't monitor how much it takes, but it would probably scare the crap out of me if I knew. So
yeah, well, I mean, it also prolongs the life of your clothes if you're not using a dryer. I mean, when you look at all of the fluff that comes out, you know, from your clothes in the dryer, you know, your clothes do wear out a lot quicker if you're drying them constantly. So it's another one to steer clear of. So
now, I'm sure that people that are still here, I mean, if you made it this far, thank you. I'm sure they would love to know, this is all great, but what can we actually do to reduce the power? We know how much power we take. What can we do? Short of replacing everything with modern equivalents that are more energy efficient, what can we do?
Turn things off if you're not using them.
That's a good one.
Lights, electronics, TV, everything.
Yep. I mean, look, there are some smart home solutions that are out there that can sort of automatically turn lights off and on at particular times to make sure that you're only using the lights when you need them, short of actually having something that automatically detects when you're in the room and then when you leave switches the light off. I mean, it's good to get into the habit of obviously switching lights off. There are times when I'll be in the house and I turn around and look down the hallway and just see lights coming in from every room. Yeah. And no one in those rooms. And, you know, those are the sorts of habits you need.
My mother was a hawk about that when I was a kid. She's like, if you're not in the room,
I know I'm going to get flack for this, but I'm sorry if you're married. Ladies, you guys you can't do it. You can't turn a light off when you're done in the basement. I come home, I find the light on. And how long has this been on? Oh, I went there this morning. It's been on the whole day yet. But I get it. Sometimes, so replacing all your lights with LED, if you're married, first thing you should do, forget the prenup, forget planning your wedding day, get LED lights. It'll save you a lot of money. I'm sorry. It's true.
Yeah. So yeah, look, I mean, I think the sorts of things that people can just do straight away, as you say, replacing all incandescent globes with LEDs. They are cheaper, and in a lot of cases they're brighter. You can get ones that either give you a warm lighting if you like the warm lighting of an incandescent globe, or you can get ones that will give you a more of a, like the sun sort of white light. I'm a big fan of white light, but I know a lot of people that aren't. But yeah, definitely going down sort of the path of the LED, you know, switching things off when you don't need them. With thermostat, as mentioned before, you know, don't think, you know, if it's, you know, there's that temptation when if you walk into a room that's really hot and you go, oh, it's so hot, and then you get the thermostat and you say, I need cold, and you keep going down and down and down and down in temperature, and then you're just going to be gobbling up that power. You know, just trust in the time it takes to cool the room. Set it at, you know, a logical temperature. Don't be driven by the emotion of being stinking hot. And yeah, maybe just condition yourself through just regular exposure to having it a little bit cooler in the winter and a little bit warmer in the summer, not just going all the way down to the, you know, sort of the perfect temperature for that moment. So, and yes, wear a jumper.
And if you have one of those programmable thermostats, like my thermostat is nothing fancy. It's probably 25 years old. But it's digital, so you can program it to keep the house at a certain temperature, certain hours of the day. Like program it to when you're at work, keep the house cooler, and then maybe an hour before you get home, have it turn the temperature up to what you like, and then, you know, turn it back down when you're sleeping at night. So that's what I do. I mean, it saves on power when you're not here, but don't in that same respect, don't like set it to turn the heater off during the day because you're not home. Oh, I'm not here. It's not going to work. If it gets cold in your house and you want it to heat up to a normal temperature by the time you get home, it's going to use a lot of energy getting the house back up to that temperature. So don't turn it off, but keep it, you know, lower than you normally do, just to save a little bit of power.
Yeah, we have the same thing, but the other way around. We don't. It doesn't ever really get cold enough for that here, but with heat it does. So we might be in a situation where you would leave that air conditioner running, but at a, you know, much warmer temperature, just so that it doesn't have to work as hard when you get back, getting the house cold again. So,
Dana, you live in Ohio as well. A few months ago, what happened that caused me to be without power for almost a week? Was it a storm or an accident or something happened? I don't remember. I think it was a freak storm with tornadoes all over the place, and it knocked out my power. And it was pretty much the height of summer. It took me 3 days. 3 days. Once the power came back on, 3 days of non-stop air conditioning to get the heat out of the walls just to get my house down to 75 degrees Fahrenheit.
Because it's not insulated well.
Yeah. So turning your heater cool off completely, you're going to pay for that when it has to catch up at the end of the day or whenever you turn it on again. Definitely.
Yep. Yeah, that was a bunch of storms that went through and knocked power lines down and things like that. It was so bad, even up here. You know, I'm like 2 hours north of you, and even up here at work, the next 3 days we had to do rolling blackouts because and I can get into that, but the power company could not keep up with demand while they were trying to fix the grid, fix all the down power lines. So yeah, we had to turn just about everything off except emergency lighting and things like that at work, and all the computers had to be turned off. The presses didn't run. So yeah, it was that was a good 3 days. But yeah, there were people that still didn't have power almost a week later.
Yeah, and the small space heaters, we mentioned those. Bad. Don't do it. It's throwing money out the window. But in my case, here we go. And this is Celsius. I believe this is about 75 degrees currently in my office, right here. It's hot.
Yeah.
The rest of the house is much colder, but most of the equipment that runs this house is in this room. So I could crank the AC and waste a bunch of money, or
and the rest of the house will be cold.
I could just set up a little fan, point it straight at me, and be fine. So tiny little things like that, at the end of the year, they make a big financial impact. I can't put a number on it, but, you know.
A couple little tips with fans, things to keep in mind is, first of all, they don't use a lot of power. Generally, the motors that run fans don't gobble up much power, so they're nice, inefficient, a nice, efficient way of cooling. Thing to keep in mind, though, a fan without a person in it is a waste.
Yeah.
Fans only work when they are blowing on you. So don't sort of think that, oh man, it's hot, I'm going to leave the fans on while I head out and then I come back and the house will be colder. That don't work like that. The fans only work if you're in them.
Small exception with ceiling fans. They do a good job in either pulling the cold air up or blowing the hot air down.
Yep. That was another thing I was going to mention, is that ceiling fans are actually very good. We have ceiling fans throughout this house, and it is amazing how well they work when you are as a kind of a stopgap. You know, like, okay, it's not quite hot enough for the air conditioner, you know, and they can actually do quite a good job keeping you cool up until you get up to that. So I would highly recommend ceiling fans, and they work in the winter as well. The most ceiling fans will have a winter setting on them. You flick a switch and they'll circulate the other way. So rather than blowing air down, they'll pull air up, and they're actually really good for
and then all the dust that's on top of it gets thrown around your room.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they're good at improving the efficiency of whatever heating system you might be using in the house. So yeah, ceiling fans are great, but as I say, if you've got it like a desk fan blowing on you, you go away, you come back, it's not going to be any cooler in the room. They work by actually blowing onto you. Cooling, of course, the other thing with cooling is you can have evaporative coolers. And a lot of the time, people end up calling those air conditioners in like some of those ads for, they say, oh, look at this cheap air conditioner. Generally with the blower, that's the one. That's not an air conditioner as far as I'm concerned. That's an evaporative cooler. They're two very different things, and you can usually tell the difference by the size, because air conditioners are typically a lot bigger because they do have a compressor in them. Air conditioners do actually work, you know, with a compressor that's actually making it cold. That's right, with a coolant in it, and it's through that sort of chemical reaction going on that they create cooling. An evaporative cooler is something else. Essentially, what it does is it uses moisture, and then it sort of blows air over it, and that makes that moisture evaporate. And the process of evaporation actually uses energy and so it leaves cool behind. So a byproduct of things evaporating is cool being generated, and they are really good if you are someone in a very dry climate. So if you're in a desert area, if you're in somewhere with a low rainfall, they are actually incredibly efficient. And certain parts of Australia, like if you're heading into some of the desert areas, all they use are evaporative coolers, and they work incredibly well, and they're quite inexpensive to run. Here in Sydney, where it is most of the time obscenely humid, they are an absolute and total waste of money, because the air simply does not evaporate enough to get the amount of cooling that you need. And I guess an example of that in the US would be somewhere like, I guess, like Florida, because I think Florida is a very humid area as well. Again, an evaporative cooler in that part of the world would just be a complete waste of money. So yeah, just sort of mentioning that when it comes to cooling, yes, evaporative coolers are a relatively inexpensive way of cooling, but you do need to be in the right climate to use them.
Yeah. So do you guys follow any YouTube channels that deal with this sort of thing, like alternative energy sources, or more economical devices?
What's YouTube?
It's this thing with videos on it.
I am someone who tends to look for things as required, whether it be on YouTube or whether it be sort of an informational site. So I don't necessarily follow an individual that might go in and do this sort of stuff on a regular basis, but I will quite regularly go and look things up, very specific things, looking for information about one thing or the next.
So I'm kind of fascinated with the concept of living off grid, but usually that means sacrificing a lot of creature comforts and things like that.
The moment I hear the term composting toilet, I'm out. I'm out.
Well, I don't know if I follow anybody who uses one of those, but I have followed a few channels, and the one that I'm really fond of is this one here. It's called Life Uncontained. This is a couple that got married and they moved to Texas, which is a fairly warm part of the country most of the time. Even in the winters, their winters tend to be warmer than most of the rest of the country. But they decided to live off-grid. They wanted to be completely off-grid. They wanted to be self-sufficient, so they built a house out of shipping containers. And you can see they've got like over 1 million, I think it was 1.35 million subscribers. They just finished the house. In fact, this video right here that I'm mousing over, there it is. That's the one where they're talking about, hey, our house is done. Now what are we going to do? And they're talking about the upgrades and things that they want to make. And so it's by no means over. But, it's gone for at least 2.5 years where they show every step of the way, and they've got their own, like, this is their solar farm here that they've built. I want the thumbnail to show. All of their water comes from rainwater, so they catch it off the roof of their house, and it goes to this system that they come up with these giant tanks, and it saves everything. They have a pump house that purifies the water, and everything is run on solar. So it's really interesting to follow. Now, obviously, they've got to monitor and budget, their power use, but there's really nothing that they have gone without. They've got high speed internet. They've got TVs, washer and dryer, sink, stove, and refrigerator in the kitchen, heated water. They have they basically took, just to get on a tangent here, they took an actual water heater, stripped all the foam off the outside, and stuck the bare tank in a wooden, just like a wooden case on the side of their house with glass on the front. And it faces the sun directly for most of the day. And the sun heats the water in that tank, and that is what preheats the water for their house. And
well, they have, I'm sure they have them over here, but it's very common over here to actually have solar hot water. And basically what you have is you have what look like solar panels on your roof. They look a little different, typically just 2 panels, and they are black with just little pipe running through them, like up and down, and it actually creates a natural convection as that heats, it moves the water through, and you heat your water using the panel on the roof. And again, that's another really efficient way of heating water. Of course, you need to be in a sunny area, and those hot water heaters often need to be linked up to electricity as well. If the sun doesn't get it all the way up, any shortfall will be done with electric heating. But
they have a backup in their house too. But
and I follow channels like that as well. A lot of living off grid, from the extreme to people that dig a hole in the ground and start building a cabin on top, to people that are like, oh no, the government is coming, I'm prepping and I'm doing everything by myself. From one to the other. But it's the little life hacks that they all do that really interest me. I would never want to do it. I like to have a house, a solid roof over my head with stuff I can, for the most part, depend on. But I would like to have the alternatives. That's what interests me about that. And a quick throwback before I forget to that power strip with the master socket on it. I use them not just for the computer. I use them for the TV. I use them for the lighting in my house. Like when I turn the living room light off, all the USB hubs and chargers and stuff that are in that corner of the living room turn off as well. In the kitchen, if I turn that overhead kitchen cabinet lighting off, the coffee maker, the toaster, all the other stuff turns off as well. So you can use them for pretty much anything, as long as they match the rating that the wattage that you plan to pull on them. So pretty handy for that too.
So look, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Do you guys have anything specific that you want to add?
I mean, I could keep going for hours, but at the end of the day, there's one thing I want to mention. People, and this is computer specific, people love their screensavers. I have a cool Matrix screensaver, or I don't know about Windows, but Mac OS has some really cool screensavers built in. The thing is, they take a god-awful amount of power, mostly from your graphics processor. CPU or GPU. That's exactly right. Yeah. Don't set a screensaver. Just set your screens to turn off after 5 or 10 minutes, or turn them off yourself.
We, for those who are old enough, lived through an era where screensavers were an essential thing, because you had cathode ray tubes that if the same thing was projected on them for any length of time, it would burn in and would be permanently there. And so screensavers came along, and I mean, they have been around for a very, very long time. And then, of course, screensavers started to become a novelty. They started to become an expression of your personality and who you are. And, all of a sudden you've got Star Wars screensavers, you've got Star Trek screensavers, you've got, flying toasters, fish.
Oh, I love the aquarium.
My computer's on aquarium. Isn't that nice? Yeah, you know how much power that's using?
Yeah, well, this is right. So all of a sudden, whereas the computer was idle, all of a sudden it's now having to process all of these graphics. It's making your CPU use more power, and it's actually going to be burning up more energy. So yeah, it's a very true thing with the modern screens that we have now, the liquid crystal screens. They don't have this burn-in situation, so you don't need to have a screensaver. But as Jay pointed out, just have them automatically switch off after a certain amount of time of inactivity. It's going to be way, way better. Now, I say that as someone who always has 3 screens go into the matrix, have the little matrix, little green.
Mr. 700 watts at idle.
Yeah, that's right. And and there is a specific reason for that. And I believe, this is just my belief, I personally believe that if you have more than 2 screens, and I have 3, that you have to have the matrix thing as your screensaver.
Yeah, kind of.
It's how the world works. So
yeah. No, I will agree.
So look, this is our first show. This is our pilot episode. This is an experiment. We don't know if anyone is going to watch this, if anyone's going to be interested in this, but we would love to hear from you. If you have watched this far, you deserve an award. Please put any comments in the chat. If you have other tips for saving energy, or if you have some information you would maybe like to know more about, or if you have something that you would like to share, please leave them in the comments. Thank you very much for watching this first episode of Startup Disk is Full. We thank you for watching. I thank you, Jay, for your time. I thank you, Dana. for your time, and hope you all enjoyed it enough to watch another one. And thanks for watching. So bye-bye.
See ya.
Wave to the camera. Okay. Okay. Stop. I'm so bad at this. Okay.
Are you sure you don't want to do this live?
This again?
Okay, I'm done. Okay. In music intro. I haven't finished writing it, but it's coming.
Sounds good so far.